This is lesson 23, part 4, and we'll be continuing our discussion of compound time. I want to take just a moment to review the Gordon rhythmic syllables we've learned so far. So recall that a one-beat note will be do. If we have multi-syllable notes, we'll continue to say do and just hold that through for as many syllables as required. So do would be a 3-beat note. Half-beat notes, not half notes, but half-beat notes, will be do, day, where each syllable we say represents just half a beat. Do, ta, data will be used for quarter beat notes, not quarter notes, but quarter beat notes, where each syllable represents just 1/4 of a beat. Do, ta, data. And we have now learned that if we divide one beat equally into 3 parts, we're going to use the syllables do, da, di to represent a set of those notes where each syllable is worth just 1/3 of a beat. Do, da, di. Setting the metronome at 60, we're going to just practice saying 8 sets of our 1/3 beat notes. Do, da, di, do, da, di. So we'll be keeping the beat in our hands. Ready, clap. Ready, speak. Do da dee, 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 do da dee. Once again, ready, go. Do da dee, 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 do da dee. With the metronome continuing at 60 beats per minute, this time I want us to say 2 one-beat notes in a row. So do, followed by 2 sets of 1/3 beat notes. Do, da, di, do, da, di. We're going to repeat that pattern 2 times. The metronome's at 60. We're going to put this beat in our hands. Ready, clap. Ready, speak. Do, 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 da, di, do, da, di. Do, do, da, di, do, da, di. Let's do that again. Ready, go. Do, da, di, do, da, di, do, da, di, do, da, di.
We learned that we can add length or duration to any of our basic note or rest values from our note and rest value pyramids by adding a dot to them. So we can take a whole note, put a dot to the right of the note head, and this will now be called a dotted whole note. And it's going to be worth a whole note plus the value of the dot. The dot is always going to be worth half of whichever note it's dotting. So in this case, it would add a half note worth of length or duration. This would be called a dotted half note. We add a dot to the right of the note head. And it's going to be worth now a half note plus the value of the dot, which is worth half of whichever note it's dotting. In this case, a quarter note. This would be called a dotted quarter note. We just put a dot to the right of the note head, and it's now worth a quarter note plus the value of the dot, which is worth half of whichever note it's dotting. So in this case, an 8th note. And this would be a dotted 8th note. The dotted 8th note would be worth an 8th note plus the value of the dot, which is worth half of the value of whichever note it's dotting. So in this case, a 16th note. If we were to designate the 8th note as our beat or pulse note, we can go over here to our note value pyramid and assign specific beats to each of these note values. So we're going to have 1 beat for each 8th note, 2 beats for each quarter note, 4 beats for each half note, and 8 beats for each whole note, just half a beat for each 16th note. So the dotted whole note is worth a whole note, which is 8 8th note beats, plus a half note, which is worth 4 8th note beats, for a total of 12 beats. The dotted half note is worth 4 beats for the half note, 2 beats for the dot, for a total of 6 beats. The dotted quarter note is worth 2 beats for the quarter note, 1 beat for the dot, for a total of 3 beats. And the dotted 8th note is worth 1 beat for the 8th note, and half a beat for the 16th note for a total of 1.5 beats. You'll notice that the dotted whole note is twice as long as the dotted half note. The dotted half note is worth twice as much as the dotted quarter note, and the dotted quarter note is worth twice as much as the dotted eighth note. Similarly, the undotted whole note is worth twice as much as the half note. Half note is worth twice as much as a quarter note. A quarter note is worth twice as much as an eighth note. So you can see the parallel here. So a dotted whole note could be broken down into 2 equal parts, and each of these note values would be a dotted half note. A dotted half note can be broken down into 2 equal parts, and each of these note values would be a dotted quarter note. A dotted quarter note could be broken down into 2 equal parts, and each of these equal parts will be a dotted eighth note. If we were to designate the dotted eighth note as our beat or pulse note, we could then assign specific beat values to each of these notes in the dotted note value pyramid. For example, a dotted eighth note would be worth 1 beat. A dotted quarter note would be worth 2 beats. A dotted half note would be worth 4 beats, and a dotted whole note would be worth 8 beats. If we were to designate a dotted quarter note as our beat or pulse note, we could assign 1 beat to dotted quarter notes, 2 beats to dotted half notes, and 4 beats to dotted whole notes.
Recall that one way we can categorize time signatures is by their beat pattern, or in other words, how many beats per measure they contain. Duple meters will have 2 beats per measure, triple meters will have 3 beats per measure, and quadruple meters will have 4 big beats per measure. Another way we can categorize time signatures is by their quality. 2 of the most common qualities are going to be simple time and compound time. In simple meters, a basic note value, in other words, an undotted note value, is designated as the beat or pulse note. What defines simple meters is that because the beat or pulse note is an undotted basic note value, the beat naturally divides into 2 equal parts. Pieces or songs written in simple time will have an even feel to them. If you feel as if you could march, walk, or run to the beat of a song, it's likely it's written in simple time. Some examples of songs written in simple meter include Joy to the World, Angels We Have Heard on High, and Old MacDonald Had a Farm. In simple meters, guitarists will need to play a straight strum pattern. Simple time signatures will always have a 2, a 3, or a 4 as the top number of the time signature. And in simple time, we can take the time signature at face value. So if there's a 2 as the top number, we can know there will be 2 beats per measure. And if there's a 4 as the bottom number, we can know that a quarter note will be our beat or pulse note. In compound meters, a dotted note value is designated as the big beat or pulse note. What defines compound meters is that because the big beat is a dotted note value, it will naturally divide into 3 equal parts or little beats. Note that these little beats will always be represented by a basic or undotted note value. Pieces or songs written in compound meter will have an uneven feel to them. If you feel as if you would swing or rock or even gallop to a song or piece, it is likely it is written in compound meter. Some examples of songs written in compound meter would include What Child Is This?, Silent Night, and Hickory Dickory Dock. In compound meters, guitarists will need to play a swung strum pattern. Compound meters will always have a 6, a 9, or a 12 as the top number of the time signature. In compound meter, the top number of the time signature tells us how many subdivided or little beats there will be in each measure. And the bottom number of the time signature tells us what kind of note value our subdivided or little beat or pulse note will be. From there, we can do the math and figure out which dotted note value will represent our big beat or pulse note.
Remember that when we are trying to categorize time signatures by their quality, whether they're simple or compound, or by their beat pattern, whether they're duple, triple, or quadruple, we don't ever need to look at the bottom number of the time signature. We just need to look at the top number. If it's a 2, a 3, or a 4, we can know that it's going to be simple time. And we can also know, just by looking at those numbers, if it's going to be duple, triple, or quadruple time. If it's a 6, a 9, or a 12, we can know it's compound meter, and we can know we're going to have to do one extra step of decoding before we can figure out what our dotted note value or big beat pulse note value will be. Let's work through the process of decoding a rhythmic example written in 9/4 time. So we know just by looking at the top number of the time signature that because it's either a 6, a 9, or a 12 that we're going to be dealing with compound meter. So we're going to start by just decoding the time signature. The top number tells us that there will be 9 little beats per measure. And the bottom number, we can think of it as the denominator of a fraction, tells us that a quarter note will be our little beat or pulse note. So instead of going directly to a note value pyramid and assigning specific beat values, I actually just want to go ahead and figure out what my big or dotted note value beat will be. So I'm going to start by drawing out 9 quarter note beats. Recall that in compound meter, we know that our big beat or our dotted note value beat will always break down evenly into 3 equal parts. So I can look at these quarter notes and group them into 3s. We know these are our little beats, so they'll be grouped into 3s. And I know that 2 quarter notes are equivalent to a half note. And if I put a dot on that, it'll account for all 3 of those quarter notes. So a dotted half note is our big beat or pulse note in 9/4 time. And you'll notice that we are therefore in compound triple meter. So since our dotted half note is worth 1 big beat in 9/4 time, this will be designated as do. And because each of our quarter notes is then worth just 1/3 of a beat, we will use the syllables do, da, di to represent our 1/3 beat notes. Glancing at this example, I can see that, well, a lot of the note values are indeed either quarter notes or dotted half notes. I also have some dotted whole notes. What am I going to do with those? Well, I'm going to refer to my dotted note value pyramid. My dotted half note is my 1 beat note, so therefore I can know that my dotted whole note will be my 2 beat notes. So I will just say do, oo for each of these dotted whole notes. Setting our metronome at 60, we will put our beat into our hands or feet just as we've always done. 1, ready, clap. 1, ready, speak. Do, 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 da, dee, do, 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 da, dee, do, do, do.